Somehow, in just 5 weeks, I've managed to complete this cosplay of this artwork by Sakizo Illustrator. At the time of recording, I'm not actually done, and I will be doing beading up until the time I leave for the con in 3 days. But this video is a catch-all of everything I have left to cover. That is the spool bag, the thimble hat, the wig, and the giant tassel on the scissors that already have their own video, and the dress already has its own video. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Here we go. Are we ready to freak out about a spool bag? I feel like this is the thing we've all been waiting for. I feel like this was the thing I was waiting for. Honestly, I'm not super happy with this. It's like wonky, like look, it's like not straight. It is not as straight as the most mediocre white man you know. It has a cool wallet closure on it. I was just like looking at the bag making section on Wawak and I was like, that looks kind of cool. I want a little wallet door like that. This started as a monster clay sculpt for me to work out how to pattern the actual spool part of it. And so what I did was I took monster clay and I wrapped it around a candle until it kind of looked like that. And then I covered it in duct tape and got me a little pattern for how to do it. And with that pattern, I did some tests. The actual body of the bag is made of EVA foam. I don't know that EVA foam was the best decision. So I got all my pieces cut out with an X-Acto knife. Because I had to, these pieces were too big for my laser cutter to score for me. So I had to trace them and cut them out myself. Another thing I had to do was, for the sake of this edge looking decent, I had to Dremel the crap out of the insides of those before I glued them together. Respirator necessary for contact cement if you're gonna use it. Respirator also necessary if you're going to burn wood details into this. I will say, the reference image doesn't really have like this crazy wood texture, but it does look like it's wooden. And anytime anything looks like it's wooden, I'm just like, I want to do the wood texture. And I kind of really like the idea of doing it where it looks like the rings of the tree, because I like looked up a couple wooden spools and saw that. I thought that looked pretty neat, so I wood burning tooled a bunch of lines in there for the sake of it. And then I primed it with a bunch of Mod Podge, because as we learned from the scissors, I hate Plasti Dip. Anyway, this is all just painted with acrylic paints and Mod Podge, and I think it looks really good. Those are the spool ends. This part of the spool is the part that's kind of messy. So it's actually got a fabric layer that has all the lace lines on it. Those are just sewn onto a single layer of fabric that is the same size as the barrel of the spool. And then this is the door to the opening. So it's also a little piece of EVA foam, and it also got a little piece of fabric that's covered in pieces of lace, and I bag lined it in there. If I was smart, if I had Ariel's brain, I'm sure there's a way you could do this where the EVA foam pieces are separate, but like the fabric pieces are not. And maybe that's possible. I don't know. All these EVA foam pieces that are getting covered in fabric, the way I'm like sealing them in to the fabric was I used an adjustable zipper foot on my sewing machine, and because you can put your needle on just one side of it, it meant that I could put the EVA foam covered in fabric under the machine and literally sew directly next to the EVA foam without going through it. You can just sew through EVA foam, but I kind of wanted to just sandwich it in there. The main barrel piece is bag-lined fabric that has been pulled over EVA foam, and then the door is also that. Okay, this is for the sake of the inside of the bag not being EVA foam and the outside of the bag having all of the layers of lace on it to make it look like it's a spool. So pulled that thing on, and then I really struggled with like how I was gonna get this door on. And what I ended up doing was I went through and I did just a top stitch around the opening where the door is gonna go, which was such a struggle that I had to move my sewing machine around to even get it through, because my sewing machine is like right behind my serger. And then I just like cut out this middle piece, like you do the little trapezoids, so you can pull those pieces back. And then those just got pulled backward onto the piece. I suppose there's definitely a way you could do this where you don't have a bunch of like stuff in the middle, like actually inside the bag, but I'm again running out of time. I got these little wallet clasps on there. It was so hard to get these on because they kept getting caught on the lace. Like they would get into the lace's hole. This was such a struggle. But if you buy one of these wallet clasps, they're made to go through like leather and stuff, but they come with these teeny tiny little screws, and I was able to get all the little screws in there, but they are so tiny. I ended up gluing them in with just some clear Gorilla Glue that I had. The way I got the door on was I took the remaining little trapezoid from the main barrel and my little bit of excess fabric on the end of the door, and I took the part of the barrel and turned it over so I could get to just those, and then I sewed those together, and then like hand sewed all of the other little parts onto the lining of the thing. And then I did something stupid, okay? I attempted to essentially bag line this thing, so I got one side and put the whole thing right sides together and sewed in a stitch, which I could do. I did manage to get a stitch in there. But what do we think happened after the stitch was in?
Needle broke.
There's my broken needle. Well, this one broken needle for this project was on the bag, of course. Yeah, I could not turn it inside out because it has a metal wallet clasp on it. I don't know why I thought I could do that. Break a needle on the like button. Yeah, so I ended up hand sewing it, hand sewing the two sides together with embroidery floss, actually, just for the sake of extra safety. It looks a little weird, but it's fine. With the barrel made and with these made, these actually just have a little D-ring sewn to a piece of grosgrain ribbon that is then hot glued to hell and back to the inside of these. I kind of struggled for a little bit on trying to figure out how do I attach these little EVA foam cones, essentially, to this barrel. And what I ended up doing, I believe this is a Cow Butt Crunchies trick, where you take a piece of EVA foam and you sew it onto a piece of fabric. So I sewed a circular piece of EVA foam to a circular piece of fabric, and then hand sewed that circular piece of fabric around the edge of the barrel and left the EVA foam part on the outside, which meant I could then get contact cement and glue the EVA foam spool to the EVA foam that is sewn on here and have it actually stick and work correctly. You can glue fabric to EVA foam, but foam to foam is such a better bond than foam to fabric, and sewing is a better bond than glue. So sewing foam so that you can glue foam to foam is a pretty decent way to do that. But yeah, I now have a spool bag. I have enough lace to where I think I'm gonna be able to kind of like, the things I don't like about the spool bag, I feel like it ended up a little long. I ended up making the barrel bigger for the sake of the wallet clasp. Like I added an inch, and also it's wonky. Like look, it's not straight. We'll say it's an old little spool that this little tiny sewing girl found, and it's one that no one wanted because it's weird and wonky and wrong. The hinge is kind of obvious, but I have enough lace to where I can take extra pieces of lace and lay them down over top of the hinge to make it less obvious. So I'm gonna do that. This is like one of the most pocketful cosplays that I have. Are we ready to hear about my thimble hat? At present, it is not finished. There's some things about this I'm super happy with. There are some things about this I'm not super happy with. This is laser cut EVA foam primed with only Mod Podge and wood glue. The inside looks disgusting. It started with a tape pattern over a glass cup. I did end up altering this pattern digitally because it wasn't quite wide enough for how I wanted it to sit on my head. I do wish it was a little more like, here's a real thimble. For anyone that, I don't know, has never seen a thimble before, this is a real thimble. This is a real vintage thimble owned by my great-grandmother. And I just threw it on the floor. I could have patterned this very differently to have, like, the more domed top, but I wanted to be lazy and use a laser cutter for the holes on the top, so I simplified the pattern to just be flat-topped. What I did in fresco was I obviously looked at this as a reference and was like, okay, I've got 3 roses and some leaves, and then on the bottom it says Choco. But instead of using the lettering on the hat as my reference for the lettering, I actually traced this lettering in Adobe Fresco on my iPad and then kind of moved it around. And then I traced an image of a rose, like a real photograph of roses, like 3 different roses, and kind of did like a vector image of them, and then like kind of went in, like erased parts of it to create what became... Essentially, I drew rose blobs and then erased my blobs where they were supposed to be lighter by tracing over a photo in a drawing program on my iPad. And then I transferred that into a laser cut file, and I cut it on my laser cutter. And that is how I got this beautiful lettering and these beautiful roses. At the same time, I also used the laser cutter to score where the piece needed to be cut, so I could digitally guarantee that that would be in the middle. And I thought that looked fantastic. Also used the laser cutter to cut a completely round holes in there, but also instead of cutting on the like thicker EVA foam, I actually cut 2 layers of very thin craft foam for that so that I could glue them together. Those ended up being like the goopiest part of this prop, but it worked out okay. I am super happy with the Choco design. When I glued the top together, because I altered the pattern digitally from what I got from the cup, the edges weren't match up all the way. Like I had a gap between the top and the side. So I was also trying to make it be a little more domed. So I covered the entire top in foam clay. But then you want your foam clay to be smooth. I wanted it to kind of blend into all that. So I got my hand wet and I just rubbed the top of it wet with a wet hand and kept kind of poking the holes back through and rubbing it. And then this didn't work super well. I probably should have just worked a little harder to pattern it into a dome and not do this, but that's what I did. Anyway, I was a little concerned with priming this because I did not want to lose all the beautiful detail in the roses. Like if you look at the roses, I did like my laser file, I chose the 8-bit dithering setting. So the roses actually have all of these little tiny dots in them that are like creating that rose shading that looks super pretty. So I was worried that if I plasti dipped them, the plasti dip might like completely overpower all of that and not completely settle into all of the little cracks and crevices. So to prime that part, I went with a really light wash of Mod Podge. So I mixed the Mod Podge with water and then used that really watered down Mod Podge to prime just the insidey sections of those. I think I only did 2 coats of like watered down Mod Podge in there. And then I primed the rest of the piece with regular Mod Podge. And then I did have a little bit of gap in the seams and I filled it with wood glue. And it didn't work perfectly. I probably could have done another thing of wood glue in there, but it worked decently. So primed the whole thing in Mod Podge. I think I did 2 or 3 coats. I was really, really careful in these areas to make sure none of this got disturbed. But the big thing I did was on the inside to keep it from cracking or being wiggly. Like to stabilize it, I did 3 very thick coats of wood glue through the entire inside. And I only started doing this year to props, but my God, is it so nice. It stabilizes everything so much. Like this is only you can see, it's only 2mm EVA foam. It should be way more flexible than this. It should be at risk of cracking. And really, if I took and went, it could crack. But as long as I pack this with like a shirt stuffed into it to make sure, it doesn't get completely smushed, it is very, very stabilized just from wood glue on the inside. And the great thing about it is like, yeah, that is not a pretty texture. You don't see it. It's on the inside. She's a heavy duty gal. She's heavy duty. So then I got to painting it. And the way I did that was with acrylic paints, just with tiny little detail brushes. Getting that drop shadow in there with just my tiniest little brush. I did one of my favorites, the folk art metallics paint, super cheap. I'm pretty sure I got them at Michael's. If you're lucky, they'll have them at your Walmart, but my Walmart's craft stock is always very lacking, but I've always loved this line of metallic paint. The outer paint is a mix of white gesso, Mod Podge, this kind of off-white apple barrel paint. I did also do a little bit of sanding over these, because it was gesso and Mod Podge, and that got pretty streaky. I was just really excited to get to painting the roses. So this was a little... I did this morning. This is footage from this morning, by the way. This gold and the gold in here, it's actually gloss Mod Podge and this, like, Jacquard Pearl X pigment powders. I think I got this on sale at some point. I've used this for a few things. It's literally a powder. I like mixing it with gloss Mod Podge. It makes for like a really pretty gold metallic paint. But it really was just like the tiniest brush I could find with the tiniest little bits of paint, to the point where I ended up going in with a sewing pin, like putting it on a sewing pin and sticking it into the foam like I was doing a stick and poke tattoo, that to get it in the teeniest little inner part of the rose. Tiny brush and stick and poke method to get the little tiny, to get all the, it's just a bunch of little dots that the laser cut. It's a little thimble that will sit on my head. The scissors now have a holster. I, from the very beginning, wanted to make the scissors like a scabbard, because sometimes you get little scissored sheaths with your scissors. But I did not have time to take on another prop making project, so I made it a little triangle bag with a little button strap. This is a real functional button. And then it has a strap on it. And this is another one of the problems I need to fix before MetroCon. This makes it sit on my back correctly, but I need like another strap on this to make it like not wiggle on my back, because it's just one strap and it's making it shift. This is not a lot to explain, because this is literally a piece of chalk. It's just a piece of chalk that I coated in resin on both sides. And then I also did like a big warbler blob in the back so that I could put wire into the warbler, so that I could put matching fabric through the wire so that it could sit in the middle of this bow. But I did not account for how heavy that would be. Look at this cursed spaghetti. Is this not the most cursed spaghetti you have ever seen? So this tassel started as some, I think it's jute rope that's really easy to get apart from itself, but it was just like natural colored, so I dyed it, which is why it is, it looks like brain spaghetti, doesn't it? So I dyed it because I didn't have red rope. You can just buy red rope, but the reason I wanted to use this rope is because tassels are actually just like, it's the same concept as making a pom-pom. You take the rope and you wrap it around something, and then you tie a knot at the top of it, and then instead of having it fan out like a pom-pom, you have it all go one way. But then just like a nice pom-pom that you would make out of yarn, you have to take a pet brush to it and brush the bejesus out of it to get it to unrope. The like jute rope that I had did kind of like very easily unfurl itself. However, I don't recommend that if you just like, if you're gonna buy a material to do this with, I do not recommend that you buy like plant fiber jute rope, because it looks kind of scraggly. It looks kind of home, and I mean, I kind of like this about it. I kind of like that it looks scraggly and homespun and like a thing a little sewing girl would have. It gets kind of matted. It's just like, it's like a long wig after a con day, and there's just like nothing I can do about that. But let's talk about the toppy part, the actual like tying of the tassel knot, because it was actually very easy. I'm gonna throw actual tutorial that I used. There's no way I'm gonna be able to explain how this knot works better than somebody that like has a specific tassel tying. It's actually really easy. So you do, okay, first of all, the way I got the ball in there is I actually put a cat toy inside of it because I didn't have any styrofoam balls of like the correct size. And then I was like looking around the house, some ball-shaped object, and I saw that cat toy and I was like, y'all got plenty of toys. But here's how the knot works. You do this like loop. You see how it's like, you do a loop like this, and then you take the rope and you take it this way, and then you start wrapping around really tight. Maybe I am pretty good at explaining a tassel knot. That looked like that would be helpful. So loop, and then you take the end, and you go the other way, and you wrap over it, and then you wrap it like a couple times, depending on how big you want this to be. This is how the regular tassel knot ends. You take the top of the original loop you made, this right here. Remember at the beginning you had this loop, and then you went this way, and you spin it around? Well, now you take the top of that loop, and you pull that, which takes the end here and the loop at the bottom, watch this part, and it pulls them through, and then you can cut either end and you're done. But because the design has this like extra stuff on it, I actually grabbed a crochet hook and did a bunch of single crochets because while crocheting makes my hand hurt, if it's just a little bit of a line of single crochets, I'm happy to get a hook out and make a little line because I didn't really know how to do this. Like, I am sure there is some kind of specific tassel technique that would do this, but I don't know what it is. Oh, and then you trim the bottom. It looked crazy, but then you just trim the bottom and then, whoop, it looks good. There's my handmade tassel that's a little bit scraggly, but you know what? I kind of like that it looks like it was made by a little sewing girl. Next, wig. I ended up going to Wig's Fashion for this wig. Originally, I thought I was going to buy a lace front because the hairline is showing a little bit, but this is a hard front wig, so I did not end up buying a lace front. I do really like Wig's Fashion for their lace fronts. They're not super pricey. The quality's pretty good. You're not getting a wig as thick as Arta, but that's kind of the point of going to Wig's Fashion. I've heard colleagues of Cosplay describe Arta wigs specifically as too wiggy, and the kind of wigs you get from like a Wig's Fashion are less wiggy. They're a little thinner, so they don't look as wiggy. But I had quite a journey with this. I ended up buying this one from them mostly because of the color was like, I mean, can we talk about more color problems? What freaking color is the dang wig? It doesn't help that it also looks like there's a little bit of variation between their hair colors, where this looks very peachy and this looks a little more cool-toned pink. I went with the color of like light vanilla pink wig that Wig's Fashion had, and that is the wig color that Miss Chalk has now. It's a very just like, I would call it a vanilla pink. It is kind of exactly my skin tone. It's a little more obvious what's going on with Roulette's hair. It's like, okay, her hair is back, and then there's two braids, and then she's got half up, half down. Choco's is kind of ambiguous, and so the first thing I tried to do, my first thought was looking at this was like 2 rope braids. So that was the first thing I did. I did 2 rope braids and then tried to like pull them up around. But with the rope braid, I found that like I just couldn't get it to look voluminous in a way that I liked. And so I went to regular braids and I went to crimping the wig, and here's how it looked with 2 regular braids that I crimped all the hair in the wig, and then I put it in braids and I like put them up, and I just didn't like how this looked. It was giving Princess Leia in a way that I was just like, I don't like how this looks on my head. It was also just like, because I bought such a layered wig, it was kind of impossible for me to do braids and have them look right and not have little bits of hair sticking out of them like that. So I was like, what if instead of doing braids, I do a wrap like I do when I like curl my hair for real? I use that like heatless, like longy heatless curler thing that I did actually get from a sponsor, but I have used the crap out of it. I was like, what if I make myself a version of that where, if you're not familiar, that thing is just like a long tube with foam and a thin wire in it so you can position it around your head. But the way it works is you put it at the top of your head right here and you clip it in and then you wrap your hair around it. But I obviously didn't want like a foam tube right here. So what I did was I stuck wire through the wig so that it's actually completely hidden right here. Then I took some just cotton batting, hot glued that onto the wire, had to get it through the wig to actually make sure it was stuck into the wig. And then I covered that in the same satin ribbon that I made the roses out of, just in case it peeked through a little bit. It would look intentional and not like cotton batting. And then I just folded that around the head like you would one of those heatless curlers. And I just wrapped all the hair around it until I ran out of hair. Look how stinking cute the back is. The back is very cute. Wow. Wow. Can you see that? Wow. These are literally just knitting needles, just stuck in there. I will say, from the side, I feel like it's giving Witch of the Waist. Am I thinking of the right Ghibli witch? I think I can take the thing because it's what. See, I like that better. I just kind of like smushed the wire in there. Now I feel like that's giving less Witch of the Waist and more romantic. Woo woo. I'm a little sewing girl. We like it? Oh, it's giving Gibson girl. Ooh, thank you. When I curl my hair on those curlers, you're supposed to like take little sections and go like one little section at a time, like I was doing with this wig. But I just like take all of my hair at once and wrap it around the curler. But for this, because this was like an actual style, I was actually being careful and like taking little section by section. And then of course, when you get to the end, you end up with all this hair, like all the hair ends up in a blob at the bottom. I just took it, braided it, and then shoved those through. And I have no glue, no nothing. There's no teasing, not a bit of teasing, not a bit of glue in here. It's all just hairsprayed to hell and back, which may become a problem at the con. I don't know how well this is going to travel. I have not yet taken this like off a wig head. We'll see. I'm hoping it can travel without a wig head. She'll be okay. But the good thing is if she gets missed. What happens when the wig comes apart a little bit is nothing major. There's just like, oh, there's an extra curl. Oh, she's been sewing too hard. Oh, she's got a little hair out of place. Oh, who cares? You just tuck that back. Yep. Bye-bye. For a cosplay about sewing, it's crazy that it has more props than anything I've made in the last 7 years. But I've had a lot of fun rediscovering my roots as a fabricator before I ever fell in love with what I could do with a needle and thread. I was a girl with a hot glue gun, painting craft foam on the floor of my dorm room. But the more advanced you get in prop making, the more precautions that need to be made, more equipment, more protections, more dedicated space. So just remember, it is okay to be armed only with those nostalgic, non-toxic tools. The hot glue, the paintbrush, the primer you could eat. Because I'm 13 years into fabrication, and sometimes I just want to hot glue it. Y'all are on it today with the trumpet emojis. My God.